Good morning, Ultra Engineers. We have a very special episode for you this weekend. We're going to discuss the week's progress, but we have a lot of guests here from some pretty interesting places. And we're going to have a completely different discussion, something very different from what we usually do. So let's just get to the week's review, and then we'll get into the other stuff. It's going to be really cool. Okay, so this week's progress, a grid and angle snap toolbar buttons were added in the toolbar, along with the rotate selection toolbar buttons. I like this. I actually like this was Andy 90's suggestion, and I actually really like the snap buttons up there because it reminds me of 3D Studio Max, and they are handy to have them. Just very easy to access right there. Transparent refaction with transparency is enabled in the editor. The only reason it was disabled was because of some incompatibilities with the grid shader, but that's all taken care of now. I also added a material thickness setting, which interacts with refraction. And most importantly of all, I decided it was time for another bug hunt bonanza, and I solved 50 bug reports. I've never done that many so quickly, but thanks to your excellent bug reporting skills, which I'm very appreciative of, it was easy to do these. I'd say there's probably about 15 bug reports that I'm waiting on responses from the author for clarification of further information. So if you have a bug report in the forum that has not been resolved yet, it might be waiting for a response from you. I might have asked you a question about or asked you for some files. So your participation is really appreciated. I could not do it without you. And we're making great progress as we strive towards Ultra Engine final version 1.0 out of early access. Now, like I said, we have a lot of guests this week, and we have people here from from two communities, both from the Torque game engine community and from the SCP Containment Breach modding community. And so I think today's going to be a really interesting discussion. So a few people have been asking me about 3D World Studio. Well, let me just explain what this is. Before there was Ultra, before there was Leadworks, before I even had a game engine at all, there was 3D World Studio. 3D World Studio came first. And this was a standalone level editor that was meant for use with any engine. It wasn't tied to a single engine. It was just for use with whatever. And people used it with Torque. People used it with Blitz 3D. People used it with Dark Basic. People used it with Game Guru, I think, or FPS Creator. People used it with a lot of different engines. And it was pretty popular. This is the technology that became the game engines that we have today that eventually became Ultra. So, now, SCP Containment Breach was an indie game. It was first released in 2012, and it still has an active modding community. And they actually used 3D World Studio to create all the levels in it. And I didn't actually know this until like a few years ago. I had no idea, but this was made with 3D World Studio. So, sorry, was somebody had something to say? Did we have any comments on that so far?
I think someone accidentally did that.
I got a couple of refinement notes for some stuff I did with snapping over in Torque, but I can jot that down for you for later if that would interrupt.
Okay, we can we'll have discuss. I only have a few slides to go through, so we can have like a full discussion after that.
DDRE is what I use instead of 3D World Studio.
Yeah. So that's actually the next slide. 3D World Studio, stopped working with, I guess, Windows 7 or Windows 8. I mean, this is an old program. It was written in like 2008 or 2007. It was at some point like Windows stopped being compatible with it. Um, and an alternative program called CBRE, Containment Breach Room Editor, was created. And I looked at it. I looked at I did a search for it to see what it was all about, and I thought it was kind of funny. On its GitHub page, it says, "Oh my God, it's not 3D World Studio, so it sucks." Sad face. Um, so there's an awful lot of goodwill towards 3D World Studio from this pretty large indie modding community, which is interesting. Okay, and that's some of those people have been asking me about a new version of 3D World Studio too. Huh. Well, if I was just gonna make an update to 3D World Studio, just same features, just updated, I don't think it would really be worth it. But lately, the last couple of months, I've been doing a lot of work on level editing features, and the new features are really good. And the thing is, these are not none of the stuff I've done in the last like 2 months in September and October were um, super high tech. We've already done the super high tech stuff, but these were just convenient features in the level editing tools, and they do have they don't require a super high end renderer to take advantage of, and they do have a higher degree of compatibility across different renderers, different engines, different renderers, different games. So it would be possible now if I took those now with those in addition to the basic tools we had before. And then I think, well, maybe it would be worth making a new level editor because these are pretty compelling features. So if there was a 3D World Studio 6, it would run on, first and foremost, it would be supported on modern Windows, which that was the big problem with 3D World Studio 5. It supports DPI scaling, which didn't even exist back when 3D World Studio was first created. It has a dark UI theme, so you don't burn your retinas. It supports editing in the 3D viewport, which that was a big feature request back in the day. Now, the more recent features that we've added are the edge turn bevels, which that's actually like really hard to model in something like 3D Studio Max, but in our system, you just select the face and it does it automatically. It's really easy. The material painting is a really great feature. We were having a lot of trouble with level design until we had the material painting, and then it became easy to make things that look good. An extension of that feature is the edge detailing feature that we have, which is it's sort of it's analogous to the hotspot feature that Valve uses, but I think it's a lot better. 3D World Studio 6 would support hot reloading, which if you're accustomed to LEDWorks and Ultra, that's nothing new, but 3D World Studio 5 did not have this. It would have a scripted extension system, and it would work with all engines because I can just make it export a GLTF, FBX, OBJ, whatever file format is pretty easy to do. And pretty much all of this work is already done because what I'm describing is the editor that we have in Ultra.
Exactly.
So the material painting, this is the most recent feature that it's still being worked on, but it's really been given us a much better ability to create good-looking levels. We were having a lot of trouble making stuff that didn't have obvious tiling, that didn't look really low-tech before this. And once we added the material painting, it was easy to make stuff that looks good. Here it is combined with tessellation, and these are just random materials. Design doesn't really make sense. I don't know why there's rocks coming out of the walls, but it does look very cool. It doesn't have to use tessellation, so it's still compatible with with some older renderers that might not support that. But it would be possible to just take these painted surfaces and just bake this into single textures and export. And that would actually be better for performance than doing all the material blending in a shader in real time.
Yeah.
This is the edge detailing feature. Unlike hotspot texturing, I don't really like it. Like, it's a good idea, but I don't like how it's done. It only handles 90-degree angles, so you can't have like an angle like this. And have the edge. With our system, you can just have the edges. Any edge can have any material applied to it, and you don't have all the problems with like texture stretching and finding the right rectangle to put there, because you can have repeating textures across the surface, and you can make the edges as long as you want without worrying about texel density or anything like that. So this is a very nice feature. That's basically it's just an application of it's an extension of the material painting system. So if this was to happen, I wouldn't start it until Ultra Engine 1.0 is released, which we're almost. It's in early access right now, and we're almost to 1.0. I think it'll be like at the very beginning of 2025 is when 1.0 will be released. I would do a Kickstarter campaign after that, which I think is a good way to launch a new idea. And then the release would be like second quarter of 2025. So the things I'd like to discuss today with you guys, and I really appreciate you for showing up. So 3D World Studio 6, if it happens, it would be a level editor for every engine, for every game. But initially, like, there are a couple of groups of people who showed up today who would benefit quite a lot from this, and they're already familiar with it. So who is it for, and what file formats should be supported? Lighting has changed quite a bit. Like, we haven't used baked lighting in our engines in years. We use all real-time lighting, but if we want to support some of these other renderers, then we might need to support some different features. And then also terrain, I'm not sure how important that is in the context of this application. That's pretty much all I've got. So with that, I would like to just let you guys let's discuss.
Okay. So I guess I'll start. So I primarily use Unreal Engine. Okay, it has some good level design tools, but not good geo tools currently as it stands. That may change in the future, but whatever. I would like to use 3D World Studio 6 with Unreal Engine.
Mm-hmm.
What's it called? I need to be able to set it up for Unreal scale. So one Unreal unit equals 1 centimeter, I believe it is. So yeah. Apart from that, exporting it as an FBX or a GLB would work perfectly, as those not materials are preserved.
Yeah, that should. Scaling it in the exporter, I assumed something like that would be needed. That should be no problem.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
And then those painted surfaces we can just bake those into single textures, and that'll run faster anyways.
Oh, cool.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, it's okay. It'll support SCP containment breach, right? Like, it won't be like too complex.
So are they using the B3D format for that?
Yeah, B3D. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I think that'll work. I think everything would translate into it, and I assume you're going to need. Do they have like a standalone light mapper for that, or does it need to? Or
It
was it?
comes with like the light mapping, the CBRE. Yeah, it allows you to like render, and after it's finished, it'll show you what it looks like with like the light map.
Oh, okay. I don't need to export a light map.
I think so, maybe.
Okay.
Yeah, that was my question about the light mapping because we had discussions about doing some sort of baking lighting calculation with the probe system, and I'm just curious of like how much of like 3D World Studio 6 will go back into Ultra Engine as features for Ultra Engine.
Well, if we can skip light mapping, if they have a standalone light mapper, that's going to be a better solution because we can just probably just set that up as to run in like a post processing step. But if 3D World Studio 6 just exports a standard like FBX GLTF, that would be easiest. I mean, or B3D too. But it sounds like they probably have a working solution for the light mapping.
Mm.
I can do that if it's needed. I mean, I've written like 3 of those, but if it can be skipped, then that's good.
Well, I suppose it does bring up a point. Are you dealing with a fixed rendering pipe or a programmable material system? Ties back into whether or not you would have light map support for a given thing. Like you wouldn't want to light map a player. That would be goofy.
Yeah. Well, in our renderer, we use PBR materials. It's all programmable shaders, but we have like a few standards that pretty much cover almost anything. But we're just talking about exporting a standard 3D file format. So that means the output of the program would be basically the same as any modeling program, like something you export from Blender or 3ds Max.
I guess so basically associate it with object name or something like that, like we do our end. Makes sense. Actually, I'm not entirely 100% sure whether or not Blender, for instance, the material node system they've got set up, it ends up in the metadata for a GLTF.
It does if you set it up correctly. If you export it, it will actually store the textures and everything. When we were using GLTF as a primary like model format, you would set up the nodes properly, and then you would import it as a GLTF, and then the engine would auto convert those into DDS. Well, it didn't convert into DDS, but it would. Well, yes, it could, but you could say like generate material, and it would do everything. But yeah, we actually do have a GLTF export with the map. It's a plugin, but I don't think it supports like the material painting yet. It's just a simple like save map as GLTF. But we actually do have like a way to export maps as GLTF today.
Oh no, I was talking about the actual shader processing nodes that you'd see in Blender as an
Oh,
example.
I don't think like anything complex gets imported as a GLTF. I think just simple like this is my metal map, this is my roughness map, this is my norm map. That works, but like doing like any math calculations, I don't think will translate into a GLTF.
Yeah, that's entirely fair. I mean, one of the things that we discussed when we were eyeballing a Vader editor for down the road is, for instance, having the ability to bake the result of a given stage. So you just you do your calcs and then you cut it out and use this.
Yeah.
Yeah. Versus, the other tool that just takes it from the top. And that's just a nightmare for performance, and you should never do that. But, well, it's what is presented as an option, so someone will.
I never used the Remote Studio. I used Tablet, but I don't know
what about Torque? What file formats would it want?
Okay, so out of the box, if we're talking purely the 4.01 specification, right now we're currently exporting stuff as DAE. We're currently also using the ASIMP library. So in theory, pretty much anything that can load, it can import. So again, we're going to have to actually eyeball GLTF, GLB, etc. exporting for those times when you want to take, say, a prefab of tiles, remix it, and export that as one building. To use a very practical example from a game I was working on at one point.
Yeah, I have a good opinion of GLTF because the material system is the only thing. As far as I know, it's the only file format with a well-defined PBR material system. And Torque is it using all real-time lighting now?
Currently, yes. There's, like I said, like we were talking the other day, we support light mapping just because there was a freaking expensive tool, and I wasn't going to tell people that no, you can't use this anymore when we shifted over to PBR. So it's there, but it's not nearly the focus of
Okay.
your day-to-day development.
Okay, so SCP is probably the only thing that might require it. We just need to look into that a little bit more. And would FBX
Well,
also be considered as an export as well? Yeah, I could probably do FBX without too much trouble. It's a lot simpler
I
when
mean,
you're not dealing with animation.
yeah, I mean, when you get right down to brass tacks, our end, it's just fill in the texture slot and it applies from an end user perspective. There's a lot of math that goes on behind the scenes, but, you know, so that's what I mean about supports it. That
Yeah.
may or may not be a route that you would be interested in.
What's that?
So that may or may not be a route that you're interested in.
What is?
Sorry. I'm not entirely certain how your metadata presents tooling wise, so I'm a little bit behind the curve there. As far as just whether or not the presence of a slot for a texture to fill in determines whether or not a given feature is applied. That would get into a whole long discussion on shader gen and the pros and cons of that. So we'll just hold that at another time.
Okay. All right. Can I open SCP CB rooms and export it as an FBX? Are they in 3D? 3D? What was the 3D World Studio format? Was it 3D WS?
Yeah, I think it was something like that.
Yeah,
DW.
Sandwich. If it's in the old 3D World Studio format, then I could load. I mean, it would probably take me like an hour to load it. Write a loader. I'll just have to look at the old source code, which I still have.
It's good, man.
3D World Studio 6 will be able to create terrain, right? And it will be visible too. Like you can see it on rooms and stuff.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you guys about it. Do you want well, okay, there's two, kind of basically like two types of terrain. There's like the type that 3D World Studio has, where it's usually like a pretty big thing that is the background of the world, and then there's also like what I guess people sometimes call it displacements, where it's like a
Yeah,
little patch of terrain and you just like move it around vertex by vertex.
yeah. CBRE doesn't have that. Like, I can't see the terrain on it.
Yeah, so those are both possibilities, I guess.
Okay.
Okay, I can say for our end, we use a terrain block, so you can have more than one. We also leverage nowadays trilinear mapping. Are you familiar with that technique?
Yeah.
Okay. It's also a technique similar to, but not identical to, splat mapping for layer blending. If you're familiar with that at all.
Yeah. So I think I could probably export terrain layers as like export the influence of each layer in a channel of one or more images, right?
Okay, well, what we ended up doing is there's well, I say we, but this is largely legacy. You've got a albedo, diffuse, yada yada, that's stretched over the entire map, so you've got your per pixel. Then when you get up close, you've got your detail map that can be of various densities depending on what you need, and that raises or lowers each individual RGB channel, so you can have yellow flowers on green grass. And then you use the UV coordinates for that for your ORM maps, or, sorry, roughness, metalness, ambient AO maps. We just ram baked that into a standard ORM. And your normals, all using the same UVs there. That way you just end up with basically your tags for the given materials for how it would map to, say, a character on your quote unquote sprite sheet, to use the simplest analogy that I can think of. That makes sense?
Uh, sort of. We can work it. We can
Well,
work out the
another long drawn
details.
out conversation.
Yeah. I have a question. How many torque users do you think there are today?
Honestly, couldn't tell you.
Okay.
I'm mostly just head down trying to get things done.
Okay. It would be interesting to know that. I'd also like to know how many SCP modders there are.
I'm one of them.
Okay. So there's at least one.
There's other people too in the server that are modders as well.
If you had to guess, how many do you think?
I'd say like a few, like probably like 4 or something. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, also, I think you also have another market of other engine users because, like a Sweatpeg here, he wants to use Unreal Engine, but he wants your editor because your editor is actually good, and so if you can't win them over with your engine, you can win them over with your tools.
Let's
So
we're all friends here. Let's
yeah, I'm just saying, like, it's a great opportunity. I think this is a great opportunity to get more feedback and more ideas of your tools.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is I've seen this work in the past. I mean, it is very difficult to get people to switch engines, but there's a much higher number of people who are willing to use a new level editor, and
Right.
especially if it's specialized for exactly what they want to do. And I don't, I don't mind which they're doing, as long as my technology is getting used some way, somehow, then I'm happy.
Yep. Yep. Exactly.
I mean, even if not cross pollination of, ideas for what is a useful tool benefits everybody.
Yeah. Okay. So
Well, I picked up levers because of his tools.
yeah, Sandwich. He's from SCP. I can't. I'm in streamer mode, so everybody's name is getting cut off. F. We have some other people who haven't said anything. I'm curious about them. AZ, I haven't seen you here before. Where are you coming from one of the SCP discords? F. Sandwiches. T. I don't know. What is that a picture of?
That's a picture of a cat, but it's taken from a weird angle.
It looks like Bane from Batman.
Their name is Two Cats Yelling.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's see. Any other? Do we have any other requests for 3D World Studio 6 or ideas for features it should include? Anything that I haven't talked about?
Is 3D World Studio 6 / Ultra Engine game get viz groups friendly?
No. What I'll do instead is I'll add a checkbox in front of the folder groups. 3D World Studio 6 didn't have any display of the scene hierarchy at all. So the Vise groups idea that was like a more primitive version of what we have now. I think if we just add a checkbox in front of these things, then I think that will do the job. Then we won't have like two separate hierarchies fighting each other at the same time.
That makes sense.
Zoning.
Utilizing viz groups
I don't know if
and
that's.
the camera editor was very useful to me when I was building mods for Left 4 Dead 2. Being able to select certain areas of my map and like putting them into their own folder, and then being able to disable certain folders, that makes it easier to work in the 2D view, so that I can get the fine details better without having a whole bunch of lines all over my work. Is that something like, could you like replicate something like that in 3D Studio or 3D World Studio 6?
Yep, you're looking at it.
Yeah, so just imagine like a checkbox and you just hides everything.
I see.
Yeah, that's one of the things we added a while back is if you hide a group, it'll hide everything in it. So you could just straight up,
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Because I would have my spawn area, and then I'd have like 5 different rooms adjacent to the spawn area. But if I only wanted to work in one of those rooms, I would disable all visibility to all other rooms. It wasn't in a hierarchy of like entities and brushes. I mean, I had that automatically set up, but I also had it that I can create my own grouping so that I can choose what is visible and what isn't.
Yeah, the folders here are not. These are not part of the hierarchy. They exist at the top level, and I combine those like the hierarchy here is combined with that, but that's what this is supposed to do. I just haven't added the checkboxes yet, but it sounds like people could use it. So
Yeah.
I think I
hide, lock, and I forget what else off the top of my head.
So,
but the one you haven't touched on, I'd be very curious about. What, speaking of hierarchies, are you using a BSP-based thing or is it ad hoc?
For occlusion culling?
Mostly for zone clustering.
We don't really do anything like that. You can set up a hierarchy like this if you want to. But like for my own engine, I haven't needed anything like that. Like internally, I'm using an aux tree, and I'm probably going to switch that over to another system in the next year.
Okay, because that was one of the things folks regretted when they had to drop. I forget what I think it was Torque Constructor. When they had to ditch interiors because part of that file format itself included zones and portals in a BSP tree scenario. And they shifted over to a purely ad hoc zone portal system where it fits better with polysoup collisions and things like that. You know, what you see is what you get. But it does mean that you have to actually manually align everything, and that would be something that I think folks would appreciate in a tool.
Okay. Casme, Game Guru Max is in dire need of a good editor, which it lacks, unfortunately. Yeah, I know the TGC guys pretty well. I have a good relationship with them. I haven't spoken with them in a couple of years, but I've done business with them in the past. Add translation, what does that mean?
I think it means for like the language. I'm talking about language.
Oh, different. Okay, I was like, oh, translation.
Yeah.
So like different languages. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's possible, and it supports it supports non-English languages like Unicode and whatnot. Like it was built that way from the start, so it'll run on a Chinese or whatever computer with a different language. Okay, well, this is a good first discussion. I really appreciate everybody coming and giving your feedback. Do we have anything else about any other comments about potential 3D World Studio 6 before we move on?
Not that I can immediately think of.
What's that?
I think he was just like text, like talking.
Inaudible. Okay. So with that, last week was a busy week. I did get our animated character working, the one that, of course, this requires a special license because I have to be able to pass it on to you guys. But I'll just show you real quick what we've got. And there he is. I like his movements. He's pretty, it's kind of like insect-like. This along the floor, this is all material painting. We found this very useful for it eliminates repetition really, really well. And we were having a lot of trouble with level design before we got that in place. In fact, I think we'll watch a little bit of a video about that because it's a really good review of the feature. We're not going to watch the whole thing, but we'll just watch a few minutes here. In this video, we're going to learn about the new material painting feature in Ultra Engine. This is a really cool feature that totally changes the way that you can create game levels. Let's start by creating a box here. We've already got this concrete material applied to it, so now let's select the face tool. Select that top face, and now we want to increase the number of subdivisions. And this is the easiest way to do it. Just keep hitting 2 until you get the amount you want. That's actually pretty good there. And now we're going to select the paint tool, and we're going to use this surface imperfections material is good. And you can see the highlight of the paint tool, and we're just going to click the mouse and start painting. This is a really neat feature. You can just paint any kind of detail anywhere. You can have up to 4 materials per mesh. So it supports quite a lot of detail. It also works with the tessellation system. So let's find a material with some good displacement. And now we're going to start painting these rocks onto the wall and see what happens. Now you have these rocks just popping out of this wall. So you can do quite a lot with this. Here's another scene that I created just in time for Halloween. And you have this alien flesh, gross stuff all over the walls. It's very cool, along with rocks. I don't know why there's rocks coming out of the walls, but I think they look very cool. So that's the material painting feature, and it doesn't have to use tessellation. It can work without tessellation. But I'm thinking what we can do is just take that, and then anywhere the material painting is used, we can bake those surfaces into a unique texture, basically, and then export that in standard 3D file formats, and it'll all work with any renderer because it's just standard normal textures. And in fact, there's performance reasons why you would want to do that, because there definitely is a significant cost when you're doing all those extra texture lookups in a fragment shader. So if you can just bake them down into a single texture, it will run significantly faster. Yeah, so that's about it. Will launch on Potato. The minimum system requirements would be a discrete AMD or NVIDIA card. Windows, possibly Linux. I'm going to be doing some Linux work next year, no matter what. So, and this is all. I don't support Linux right now, but it's. I have earlier builds of it running on Linux, and the whole thing was designed with that in mind. So it's not much of a stretch. It's just a matter of when it should be done. That's pretty much all I've got. I really want to thank everyone for joining the discussion today. It was great to get feedback from a variety of different communities. And I'd be interested in continuing the discussion with you on how we can make a 3D World Studio a level editor that is useful for everyone to use with all kinds of games and engines and renderers. Thank you all for coming, and I'm going to stop the video right now.
Okay.
Okay.